everyone to Star Trek Online, a very special episode. I'm your host, the Housecoat Gamer, joined by my friend Takashi Yamato.
Kapla!
Today is a very special episode. Based on the recent return of the USS Enterprise, Nova Charlie Charlie 1701 Delta, represented here as the ISS Imperium, a reskin of the Cygnus Temporal Battlecruiser, we are going to be creating something of a recreation of the Battle of Viridian 3. Now, since Viridian 3 isn't on the map, we are using Kobali Prime as a substitute.
Yes.
Make do with what you got, right? So, let's run a recap of Generations up until this point. We're going to be skipping over Generations and going straight to the Enterprise B, and going straight to the Armagosa Sabbath Observatory, where Soren blew up a star.
Yes. Let's go ahead and just cover the TNG. Let's cover the whole TNG segment in its entirety. It starts basically with a promotion ceremony for Worf going from lieutenant to lieutenant commander, with something of a nautical theme with the old HMS Enterprise.
I think it was actually the old frigate USS Enterprise, but
Uh,
anyway, Worf gets dunked in the water. He hates it.
yep. And Data, on the advice of doing something unexpected, shoves Beverly in as well.
Regardless, I was trying to push forward to the actually important
Oh,
parts.
right, fair enough. Anyway, Picard receives some disturbing news and goes off on his own, and then they receive a distress signal from the Amargosa Observatory. They respond and they beam teams over to look for survivors, and they only find one, a Dr. Tolian Soren.
Soren has a link to the Enterprise lineage, in case none of you were aware. He was originally rescued by the Enterprise B. During this
Yes.
time, Data installs an emotion chip, which is very important to future events. As the emotion chip goes haywire, and Geordi LaForge is captured by the bird of prey belonging to the Duras sisters Lursa and Betor, represented by the IKS bug.
Pamolth is the name I gave this thing.
The Pimolf. Very well.
The random name generator gave it Pamath. I changed the A to an OL.
Very well. The Duras sisters beam LaForge, who is compromised, and Soren to the ship. Riker and Worf attempt to rescue them. It doesn't end well. To make a long story short, Picard and company figured out where Soren was going. Viridian 3.
Yes.
Blow up the star.
Yes. And they arrive, and
there's something of a prisoner exchange. That said, Geordi is compromised. His visor gives the shield frequency
to the Duras sisters,
who remodulate their torpedo weapon systems to directly bypass the shields.
And they launch a surprise attack.
Now, let us begin. The torpedo first strikes just above the deflector dish. Some people would argue, what's the point? Striking the dish doesn't matter. It does, because many of the components for the shield generation system are just behind the deflector dish. In fact, the dish is part and parcel of the shield grid. It gets damaged, there are going to be problems maintaining shield integrity. So the shields have to lock to a specific frequency. In this case, the one that is compromised. As Captain Picard is on the ground dealing with Soren, Riker is in command. Now,
yes,
many people have argued Riker should have just opened fire with everything he had. However, this would be a mistake. 1. The bird of prey used by the Duras sisters is a slightly modernized D-12, likely incorporating technology from the Romulans and modern-day Klingons. So, the ship is more than capable of holding its own in a firefight.
Yes. And 2, they're in a gravity well.
While this is not specifically brought up in TNG, Newtonian physics are a bitch. Babylon 5 actually brings this up quite well. General Robert Redcourt says this: "It's a diversion. If we are pushed into the gravity well, it's like fighting with your back to the sea. And while the inertial dampeners keep the people inside from getting jostled around like a bag of Skittles,
One wrong move and you're falling towards the planet."
So, first move: get out of orbit. Lock phasers, return fire, get out of orbit. Phasers fire, another burst of disruptors from the ship.
Yes.
Now,
the Duras sisters keep firing and pursue.
They fire,
and
the disruptors make multiple impacts, some on the nacelle. Now, I know I'm not exactly into wanting, but you get the general idea. Get the hell out of orbit. During this time, Worf briefs Riker on the class of ship. They likely know it is a D-12 class bird of prey, and due to design flaws, these ships were retired, likely due to their very poorly designed cloaking device.
Yes, and the defective plasma coils that go into that.
And with the shields being, well, they want to get rid of this damn thing quickly. So, Data initiates an ionic pulse and a small volley of torpedoes, which only separates right on target, are fired at the cloaked ship.
Yeah, fired at the ship as it cloaks.
And it explodes. Obviously, we can't show the explosion. Now, people keep going, Riker should have fired everything he had. Or Riker is an incompetent. They think, what would Sisko have done? This is a mistake. 1. He is cognizant of the fact that there are well over 1,000 people aboard his ship.
This is prior to the Dominion War. And
the galaxy also weighs 5 million metric tons. And again, the IDF is not going to only keeps you from getting shaken around inside. It's only useful for
internal inertial dampening, not preventing you, not overcoming the effects of gravity.
Or weapons fire. Newton's third law. You're still gonna feel it. That's why you get shakes, rattles, and rolls every time you get hit with weapons fire.
Yes.
So, those 2 torpedoes were really at risk of putting them into the gravity well. So, Riker's first objective: get out of orbit, get himself some breathing room.
Yeah.
This is actually something very useful in, well, air combat, which, to a point, Star Trek warfare is based on. That being, get the hell away from the ground.
Yeah.
And the planet will eventually drag you in. So,
yeah.
Get away, get as much room as you can. But you
Yes.
can't. But due to the trilithium warhead of death, you can't get too far away.
Yes. However, however, the Duras sisters had the last laugh because residual damage from their last volley caused a coolant leak.
Eventually, the warp core breaches and the Enterprise D's drive section is destroyed. Naturally,
They've
a lot of people in the fan base like to mock Deanna Troy's piloting skills. How does this make any sense to you people? 1. She is not a trained helm officer.
yeah.
2. The navigational systems went offline the second the drive section exploded. It was a
Yeah.
miracle she was even able to stabilize the ship. She had a lot of help from Data.
Yeah.
So, yes, the crew may have continually needled her about it, probably playfully because really she was the reason they all survived.
Yeah. And yes. And the saucer section, with everyone having evacuated to it, crash lands on the surface of Viridian 3. And after Kirk and Picard deal with Soren, the Enterprise Starfleet manages to get relief ships, and everyone is rescued.
The saucer section is recovered and placed in the Fleet Museum. 15 years
Yes.
later, Geordi LaForge takes command of the Fleet Museum.
And he starts rebuilding it as something of a personal passion project.
Think of it like an engineer restoring his favorite railroad engine, because that's effectively what the Fleet Museum is, a railfans museum for starships. Or, more accurately, the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, because these
Yeah.
are effectively just evolved airplanes.
Yeah. And he says that he takes the engines and nacelles from the USS Syracuse. Now,
Which may have
this
actually appeared in DS9 during Take's least favorite scene, and actually something I actually enjoy.
yes, yes, the Battle of Chintoka, where the Breen first show up, and the Breen energy dampening weapon allows them to make mincemeats of the Alliance fleet.
Including, notably, one Galaxy-class starship. This may, or may not, have been the USS Syracuse.
So if it lost its saucer section but the star drive was still intact, it might have also gone to this museum, and Geordi
Being Geordi.
would have decided to use it to help rebuild the Enterprise D.
Now, what could Riker have done differently? I honestly don't see how he could have done anything differently. His resources were one Galaxy-class starship, not exactly the most agile thing in the universe, and other than a few minor modifications to the ship, she more or less hadn't seen anything significant change to her. Her shield generators were basically still the same as built, something people keep forgetting. You'd have to tear the ship apart to get at all the big, significant parts.
Yeah, and the Enterprise D hadn't really the Enterprise D hadn't really suffered the kind of uber extensive damage that would require a layover in a shipyard for a massive refit cycle.
Sure,
It received damage over the years, to be sure, but not
that's
enough to
that's
not enough
hull
to
plates.
yeah. Not enough to warrant a complete refit cycle.
Not enough to require stripping all the parts out.
Yeah.
So, externally and internally, she was completely unchanged from how she was built.
Yeah.
A few
Only.
module swap outs, fine. But
Yeah.
nothing significant internally.
Yeah. Future Galaxy class starship. Later Galaxy class starships probably. Well, Galaxy class starships built in the years after, leading up to 2371, probably had some of the same, some upgrades design based on experience learned by the Enterprise D, but technically the Enterprise D launched in 2363. If we go, Star Trek Adventures says a ship gets an extra systems point in a refit cycle every 10 years. So if we're so the Galaxy class apparently launched in 2359. So if the D was going to get, refit cycles general upgrades could have been done in 2370, 2369, but for the if we're just doing the ship itself, it would have only put into a shipyard for refits in 2373, if then.
2 years after her destruction.
Yes.
So she was more or less stock.
Yeah. More or less stock. No real proper upgrades.
Every other ship as seen in the series afterward, sure, they'd seen significant upgrades, refits. The Akiras, certainly.
Yeah.
But not the D. They wouldn't
Yeah.
go into full panic mode until 2362. 2372.
Yeah.
So, a stock galaxy. His engineer's vision is compromised. Internal damage. And the lives of 1,000 people. Again, this is pre-Dominion War. Galaxies have a significant civilian population aboard. Riker
Yeah.
has to think about that. So, standard procedure. Get the hell out of orbit, find out what's going on, what happened, correct the problem, and then kill the damn thing. But as the D is taking significant damage from disruptors, torpedoes, you get the idea.
Yeah.
He goes, okay, cockamamie scheme, what do we do?
Yeah.
Ionic pulse, reset the plasma coils, torpedoes.
Trigger the cloaking device. Fire torpedo.
Now, was this a great end to the Enterprise D?
Not really. I mean, we all know her. We all love her. She should have had a better end, but, well, it's the Duras horse.
It's also practicality. Real life writes every script.
And when they were making this movie, they realized that the Galaxy class model that they had and the sets they had for the Enterprise D interior, while good enough for television work, just did not translate as well to the silver screen.
That's why all the sets were darker. And they just realized there's no way we can get a Vorcha in here.
Yeah.
At least the Vorcha would have a decent chance in hell of fighting this thing.
Yes.
So they had to use a movie grade model. And there was only one ship that could do the job, the Burrell. So they had to reuse the Burrell model. It also cut some costs because they reused footage from Star Trek 6. Okay.
Yep.
That's cost cutting. So, real life plus lore reasons led to the destruction of the D and the eventual creation of the Enterprise E. Did the D deserve a better death? Yes. But could they have realistically done it? Making movie miniatures is expensive.
Yes.
And modifying one, even more so.
Yeah. That's why when they realized the issue, they decided to kill the D so that they could make a brand new ship for the next few TNG movies. And when we came to Nemesis, that's why when we come to Nemesis when we come to the final TNG movie, Nemesis, that's why we don't see any Dideridex warbirds. We see custom built, we see newly built Romulan ship models just for that movie. The Scimitar and two Norexian Mogai whatever warbirds.
We'll just call them Valdor type for simplicity's sake.
Yes.
So, you couldn't use the Dideridex. You make two warbirds. You can't use a more modern-looking Klingon ship. You have to use the old Burrell. You don't have a choice.
Yeah. These days, with computer imaging, you don't have those limitations, but this was the late 90s and early 2000s. Well, this was the early 90s and into the early 2000s.
The best computer of the era was unquestionably the Commodore Amiga, and that's the consumer grade. The Silicon, the SGI mainframes used to make Generations work. Those were obscenely expensive, and they don't hold a candle to the computers we use today.
Yeah.
So,
And Windows 95 was like the best best operating system at the time, if I remember correctly.
actually Windows 3.1, but you get the general idea. They had limited resources, and they had to get rid of the D because they didn't have a choice. It was literally cheaper just to build a new model.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, is true in many things, including warships. The Independence class, for example, its infamous decommissioning. That's because they discovered a gearbox problem, and they went, we'd have to tear the ship apart, and it's too expensive to do it, so we're just going to put the ship in mothballs and be done with it.
Yeah.
The same applies to pretty much every project in the universe. If it's too expensive to retrofit something new, you build something to retrofit something old and fix it, you make something new.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that was the D. Do we like this fact?
Not really. But we have to live with it.
That said, we must thank Terry Metalis for giving us what we want, for giving the D her standing ovation. After all, she is the fat lady.
And she is warming up for one grand final performance.
We may also do further battle breakdowns if this proves popular enough. Put in your requests.
Yeah, and we might do. I certainly wouldn't mind doing some more battle breakdowns. I mean, they are. This is interesting. Ron is the main source of lore, but I will chip in where I can with what I know.
See you next time. Housecoat Gaming.
Takeshi Yamato, signing off.